What's up? Welcome back. Welcome to Unit 1, Lesson 4. Today we're going to be talking about segments, midpoints, and distance. So midpoint formula and distance formula are going to be two important formulas that you're going to want to commit to memory. So we're going to start going over those today. We'll give you those at the beginning, but when SOL time comes, you're going to need to know those by heart. So make sure you practice committing those to memory. So segment addition postulate is our first kind of vocab term here today, and it's very similar to the angle addition postulate that I talked about in lesson 3, where two smaller pieces make up a big piece. So all this is saying is small piece AB and small piece BC, if you add them together, right, they're going to be equal to the whole entire AC. So simply put, that's what the segment addition postulate means. Okay. So let's look at our first example. EG is 59. So from here to here is 59. Okay. What are EF and FG? So I warned you guys, I cautioned you to look out for this in the last lesson. But notice that this doesn't say what is x equal to. It says what are EF and FG. So after we go about finding x, we got to plug those back in order to get those segment lengths. So EF is 8x minus 14. And then we got plus, because it's the segment addition postulate, FG is 4x plus 1. And all that is going to have to be equal to 59. So now we just need to use a little bit of algebra to figure out what x equals, and then we can plug those back in. So start by combining like terms, 8x and 4x. We got 12x, negative 14 and positive 1. That's going to be negative 13 or minus 13, and that's going to be equal to 59. Got to add 13 to both sides. So we got 12x equals 72. Twelve times x, so we got to divide by 12. So we got x equals 6. Okay. Now x equals 6, true, but we're not done. The question asks what is EF and FG. So to figure those out, we just got to plug it in. So EF is 8x minus 14. So we got to plug in for x. Plug it in 6. So 8 times 6 is 48. Minus 14 is 34. So EF equals 34. And then it doesn't tell us that F is in the middle, so we don't know if they're the same length or not. If we knew that F was in the middle, then we could say, okay, if EF is 34, FG has to be 34, but it doesn't say that F is in the middle. And it also looks like FG is smaller. So just to be safe, let's see what FG equals. So we got FG, and that's going to be 4x plus 1. So we got 4 times 6 plus 1, and that's going to be 25. Okay, so EF is 34, and FG is 25. And that works out because we know the total thing has to be 59.
Oh, okay, this is your room. Okay. All right. I saw the door kind of cracked, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Sorry for that interruption. That's the joys of staying after school. You're here when the custodians are cleaning up. So that's who that was. So like I was saying, we got EF equals 34, FG equals 25. And that works because we know that the total has to be 59. So 34 plus 25 does equal 59, so that works. Okay, moving on. Okay, so now we're going to learn about midpoint. So I said before we didn't know if that F was in the middle of that last one, but here we're going to talk about a point that's actually in the middle. Okay, so when we have a midpoint, that means that the midpoint is dividing the line into two equal parts. So these marks here, that's what these marks mean. That this part AB is equal to this part BC. If you're dividing something in down the middle in half, you're dividing it equally into two parts. Okay? So now, if you're dividing them equally into two parts, we got 6x minus 7 and 5x plus 1. If you're dividing it in half, Q is the midpoint. Okay, Q is right in the middle. So that means that those two pieces have to be equal to each other. 6x minus 7 is equal to 5x plus 1. Okay. Then you just got to use a little bit of algebra to solve. Take away 5x. Add 7. So x is equal to 8. Okay. But again, notice it says what are PQ, QR, and PR. So it's not only asking what x is equal to. Okay. So the easier thing about this one is since it's the midpoint, we only need to plug it in once because both halves are equal. So we got QR equals 5x plus 1. Plug in 8 for x. So we know that QR is 41. 5 times 8 is 40 plus 1. But if QR is 41, then PQ is also 41 because they have to be equal. Now, the last thing, PR, what's the whole thing equal to? Well, if they're both equal to 41, then PR is equal to 41 plus 41, which is 82. So for midpoint, you only got to plug in once because both halves are equal. Now, I want you to think about this question on your own, and I'm actually going to have you write it down probably on a blank sheet of paper or in your notebook. If I'm at mile marker 24 on Interstate 95 and whoever she is at mile marker 62, where should we meet? Explain how you figure this out. So I'm not going to really tell you the answer to this. I just want you guys to kind of think about it and try to come up with an answer and kind of tell me how you got to your answer. But I will kind of talk about example A here at the bottom. So it has AB has endpoints of -4 and 9. What is the coordinate of its midpoint? So we want the middle of -4 and 9. So one way you would think about this is you want to keep on moving in a direction until you reach the middle. So for every 1 we move here, or actually that's 2, -4 to -2 is 2. We want to move 2 in this direction. So that's 9, we need to go to 7. Okay, we want to move 2 more, 7 to 5. And then we go -2 to 0. And then we go 0 to 2. And then we go 5 to 3, this would be. So we run into a problem. Right now we're at 2, that's 2. And 3, that's 3. Now, if it's in the middle, then those numbers should be the same, right? So that will make both parts equal to each other. So if we got 2 and 3, well, we just need to figure out what the middle of 2 and 3 is. And the middle of 2 and 3, of course, would be 2.5. So kind of conceptually, that's how we want to think about it. You want to keep on going in each direction until you reach a middle point. This one's a little tricky because we got to a 2 and a 3, and then we had to figure out the middle of those two. But on the next page, I'm going to show you actually the formula, the easy way for figuring out midpoint. So this question asks, what if my friend and I lived on the coordinate plane? I live at 7, 5, and my friend lives at 2, -4. So they just complicated our lives a little bit because anytime you're moving in a diagonal direction, you can't count the spaces. Because they all meet at abstract points. So we got like this point, we don't know how long that is, and then we got like this point, we don't know how long that is, and then this point, we don't know how far that is apart. So you can't just count the boxes. So that's why they said if we live on a coordinate plane, okay? You can't count in this direction or in this direction because you just count the lines and count the boxes. But you can never do that when you have a diagonal. So we can't just count. So, okay, what do we have to do? Well, probably we have to apply the midpoint method, right? So if we think about the middle is halfway, the middle is half. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find halfway between your x's and halfway between your y's. Now to do that, really all you have to do is add the points and divide by 2. So we got the x coordinates, 7 and 2. Halfway between them would be 7 plus 2 divided by 2, which would be 9 divided by 2, which would be 4.5. And then if we want to do the y's, we have 5 and -4. 5 plus -4, or 5 minus 4, divided by 2, which would be just 0.5. So that would be the midpoint between 7, 5, and 2, -4. And this right here, what I just showed you, this is the midpoint method. This is the midpoint formula. Okay. So on the next page, it's right there on your paper. That is the actual midpoint formula with no numbers plugged in. You add the x's, divide by 2. You add the y's and divide by 2. Okay. So I'm going to do one example for you, and then I'm going to let you do the rest on your own. So we got 0, and 8, 4. So our x's, 0 and 8. 0 plus 8 divided by 2. And our y's, 0 plus 4 divided by 2. And that's going to give us our midpoint. So 0 plus 8 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. 0 plus 4 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. So for number 1, the midpoint is 4, 2. And it's just that simple. Now, another variation that they could put on this question is they could give you one of the endpoints and give you the midpoint and ask you to find the other endpoint. So this next example is one of those. Okay? So I live at 7, 5, and I know that the halfway point between us is 11 and 7. So where does she live? So this is find the endpoint, not find the midpoint. Okay? But we can use simple kind of arithmetic algebra to figure out how to find the endpoint since we know the midpoint formula, right? We know that x1 plus x2 divided by 2 equals the midpoint of x. Okay. So what do we know? Well, we know x1 and we know the midpoint of x. All right? So if we plug those in, we got 7 plus x2. We don't know where our friend lives. Divided by 2 equals the midpoint of x, which is 11. That's the middle. It says it's the halfway point is at MPX, 11. So now we just use some algebra. We got this big old divided by 2, so we're going to want to multiply by 2 first to get rid of that. Times 2, cancel that out. So we would have 7 plus, we use the same color. So we have 7 plus now x2, because we still don't know that, equals 22. Now we can just solve to figure out what that x point is. Minus 7, minus 7. The second x point where my friend lives is 15. So we got the first piece of the puzzle. So we write that up here. We got the x, 15. Now we want to do the same thing for the y. So we got y1 plus y2 divided by 2 equals the midpoint of the y, right? So we got our y1 and we got our midpoint y. Okay, so we just need to plug those in. We got 5 plus y2, we don't know, divided by 2 equals midpoint y, which is 7. We have to multiply 2 again by 2 again to cancel that out. So we got 5 plus whatever the second y is equals 14. And then we could just subtract 5, and we learn that our friend actually lives at x15 and y9. So that's how you go about finding the endpoint when they give you one endpoint and one midpoint. Okay, I'll do one more example of that one because I know that one's a little trickier, and then I'll let you guys do the rest of those on your own. And then that'll be the end of this video. I'm actually going to make a separate video for distance because that's a whole nother skill, and I like to break up my videos in skills. So this one is, again, finding an endpoint from a point and a midpoint. So given that the midpoint of ST is 5, negative 8, find the other endpoint. Okay, so if T is at 0, 4, let's start with our x's. We got x1 plus x2 divided by 2 equals midpoint of x. Okay, this is our midpoint of x up here, and this is our x1. So we got 0 plus x2 divided by 2 equals 5. Multiply by 2 to cancel that divided by 2 out. So we got 0 plus x2 equals 10. Well, that's just 0, so x2 actually equals 10. So we got the first part of our coordinate. Now we just need to do the same thing for the y's. I'm going to skip the formula. Well, no, I can write it. We got y1 plus y2 divided by 2 equals midpoint y. We got midpoint y up here. We got y1 right here. And we got to find y2. So we got to plug in. y1 is 4 plus y2. We don't know that. Divided by 2 equals midpoint of y, which was negative 8. I'll draw a line down here so I can separate those. So we got to multiply by 2 to cancel out the 2's on the left. And now we got 4 plus y2 equals negative 16. Subtract 4 from both sides. Y2 equals negative 20. So the second part of our coordinate is negative 20. So this is our answer. That is our endpoint. So the thing that's going to be changing in each of these problems is your x1, y1. So they're going to change the endpoints on them. So this is X1 now, and this is Y1. This is X1 now, and this is Y1. So that's the thing that's going to be changing, but the midpoint is staying the same. So see if you guys can do those last 3 problems, and then ask me for help or come to show me when you're finished. There will be a second video for distance because, like I said, that's a separate skill. So this is the end of this video.